Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Defending Public Cloud for Enterprise, Tricks and Tips. My name is Carol Auth of SANS, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speaker is Moises Margotto. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenter, please enter them into the questions window at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Moises.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Carol, for this introduction, and thank you everyone for coming. And first of all, and more important, happy Friday. For those that are seeing this on Fridays in your time, mornings, afternoons, or evenings. Even better, for sure. And let's talk about a little bit about these public clouds and what we can do to defend these clouds, especially what we can do to protect our companies and the companies that we've been working for as an employee, as a providers, as a service provider, or even as an external, and what we can do for that, right? And let me just introduce briefly by myself. My name is Moises Margotto. I have been working for information security and cybersecurity almost for 20 years. Yes, I can't say it's not have been a short journey until this time. Cloud computing since 2015, right? I can see the cloud is basically transforming from something that we known before as just a service pool or resource pool in something very, very big that become the first option for many applications, many workloads. I hold on also some certifications from ISC2 and also some certifications from ISACA and some other ones. Yeah, and just showing here, because in the first time that I start seeing about the cloud computing, I'm feeling by myself about this cartoon guy here. For people that's probably it's near to my age or looking in the Google, we'll start seeing Mr. Magoo. Mr. Magoo is a blind guy that run a lot of funny moments, driving and mistaking, maybe talking with some monuments or some animals, feeling that is talking with people. When you start looking for the cloud, in sometimes you shows a little bit blind, but you can see here is not too hard to get and move forward. What we have been talking today, it's the context about the cloud providers. And our main focus here will be about the three main ones. These three main ones is AWS, Microsoft Azure, and the Google Cloud. But not only about these ones, I come here also to share some lessons learned about some other cloud providers that maybe it's not something easy or ready to run some protections, but at least we can start getting more traction with those as well. A little bit about the risk perspective, okay, because everyone today is talking about information security or cybersecurity. The risk comes first, and we have to look at that. Especially because normally as a security professionals, somebody try to translate with us what we can talk with the business side using the risk language. And this one we'll talk a little bit. Shadow IT, who never knows, right? Who never runs a server in behind your desk or a server behind your inside of your machine or even outside of that. And this is one of the important things that we have to discuss today. And finally, put the hands in the dirt. Let's protect, detect, and remediate the issues in the public cloud. We are finishing with some Q&As, and we'll be happy to answer and also learn with your topics at the end. Okay, where are you in this context? in this context. In running and my conversations, internet forums, or talking with many different people, as especially my professional career is also dedicated more in the healthcare industries, I can see that people could start to say, hey, there is no cloud here yet. We run on-prem and we're happy with that. But it could already start, but we will not. But sometimes security people is not involved or involved you initially. It's important one. One thing that we'll talk a lot over this webcast today is about our ability to detect it in our environments. And okay, you have one provider, you have your favorite one, or your company just start with one provider. It's nice, but it's always a time to add other ones. I know I'm a security professional as well. I'm busy with many different things, but we know that if you can be specialized in one cloud provider, it's cool, but it's hard for the enterprise-wide just put everything in just one provider. They could start to saying, hey, maybe the AWS is not ready to do that. Let's start with the Google Cloud. Or the workload could also come with a merge or acquisition from another company. And they already have workloads in there. And sometimes it's also cheaper. And cost is always a hard argument to try to defend and say, hey, let's use just one provider. Multi-cloud providers, yes, but how about the rules? Are you able to leverage to all? Right? Yes, yeah, always I say, because we can do that, but it's not something easy, especially because each provider talks and mentions and names some resources in a different ways, sometimes also handle resources in different ways, right? And regulations and compliance are surging over the field. It means you have an stable environment, nice, it's protected, okay, but regulations come through quite quickly. Just as some examples, we have, for example, in the healthcare industry, a big standard coming through EU is called MEBR or IVDR. That's basically transforming the way that we are supporting the healthcare software and the equipments. And it should change the way that we are looking for. It's not something that, okay, I'm aligned with NIST, I'm aligned with CIS, but it's not enough. And remember, different providers, different ways to leverage this one. And always, I like to use this acronym here, is a no TTT, means no team, no time, no tools, right? I'm pretty sure that I'm not the only one that is seeing this kind of issue, but here is some lessons learned that could help us in our jobs to handle these workloads. Just before we moving forward and talking about the risk, I just want to emphasize, okay, we are talking about 3 big providers, but more clouds will come. It's something that we know that more big providers are investing a lot of money to get on the stake of this market, and they are not could show so mature, but normally business areas could basically push down, and you have to handle this one in some way or somehow. Okay, risk. And the first thing when starting about the risk, the best avoid instead of mitigate. Okay, something could happen for sure, but if you can say, for example, that your servers are not exposed to the internet, they are not facing to the internet. We're talking about public instance or public instance in AWS or internet reachable instance from Google Cloud or something like that. It's a risk that you will avoid. We should not take care about too much details because it's not an internet-facing resource. It's one example that a risk that we avoid instead of to put firewalls, web application firewalls, bastion hosts, or even security groups, network security groups. Wow, it's a lot of names that you can put in there to protect these ones. Just looking for on-prem, nobody that I know want to just get, for example, domain controllers or directory services, and just even with the internet connectivity, just put public IP in theirs. Nobody do that. Why you should do that in the cloud? Okay, they could be publicly reachable, but which service that we're talking about? This is one thing that you also will repeat a lot today. Born right, high chance to keep right. It means well-planned architecture when we are moving or creating a workload in the cloud. Creating means meeting with developers, business stakeholders, or even managers to say, hey, we can do that in a good way. And let's use some practices to, one thing that I just mentioned about public facing and just face to the internet, what's really necessary. If you didn't put the guardrails before, hard to put it afterwards. Shift to the left is still useful to solve issues earlier. Risks looking for the operations or production perspective are not something easy to handle, or is not something easy to or cheaper to fix. A lot of these issues could come solved from the developer side. Okay, looking for the DevOps infinite symbol, if we can solve reviewing the code, if you can solve using hardening images, or even Docker container images. Wow, today's Friday. And looking this way, you can find a lot of ways to, like the first bullet, avoid instead of mitigate. Here, a tip for teams that it's also like me, over some heavy regulated industries. Sub-services control are always a good option. What it means in the real scenario, it means that your compliance teams or internal control teams are able to query some controls, looking for the logs and getting the evidence that they need. They don't have to reach you out in the technical perspective, say, hey, show me if the console ports are not exposed. Better if you can provide a way that they can consume that information without involving you all times to provide some evidence when it's possible, right? And there are a lot of ways to do that in a secure way. Just provide the information that they really have to know. And the final word about the risk, and it's something also applicable to us: automation, 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 all time. Nobody have more time to still running routine activities that could be replaced by a script, that could be replaced by a macro or any other way, right? When I joined this cloud journey, I also get I try to apply sometimes some knowledge that I had before to use, okay, if it's API data or API reachable data, why not collect that using even some bash scripts or Python or any other language? Here, we're not saying use this and that, but look for a small task that you have to do and okay, even just a 5 minutes task, a 2 minutes task, or even a 5 clicks task that you have to run, small tasks, and just replace that by a script. And you start seeing how much time that you gain to improve security, to look for the environment, and so on. Okay, Shadow IT. Let's talking about some hard aspects or some hard facts about the shadow IT. Just as a definition, uh, shadow IT means some IT systems, applications that they are created or maintained by someone that's not involved or not aligned with IT or any technology internal team. Basically, they are create one small application and just offering this application to some colleagues and say, hey, you can use this application here to do your job. One of my previous experience, we find that a pretty smart guy internally, he develops an application that process corporate credit card receipts and just store it on his laptop and also send to a lot of people his laptop IP to say, hey, you can just go here, put your username and password and start looking your receipts. And fine, but where is it? Who protects that data? How about privacy? How about the data that he's handling on his laptop, right? Okay, maybe it's not the laptop, but one thing, just looking for the opposite, just looking for the another side of this desk. Why this guy not start with IT to host this application in there? Sometimes even as a security professionals, we should take care to not put so many controls in advance or requirements in advance that avoid people to talk with us. And here is a hard fact to us, and maybe it's just a reflection time, that maybe we have to look, okay, let's be more open for the new applications. Just put guardrails, don't have to put blockers, don't have to put walls, bumps. You can just be welcome for more, and instead of creating shadow IT, they are removing the shadow IT. With one good example could also call to other good examples. IT departments can't block new workloads. It's a reality. The workloads will come. And a person from the marketing department will develop a website and hire a third party to host it in the WordPress. Who is taking care about the WordPress vulnerabilities? That's not too much, right? What do you think? It's a lot. And afterwards, if it's something happened, you'll be involved as a security professional, as a security leader, right? And one thing that I also always, and I have a chance to say to my colleagues, my friends, other professionals from the IT security is, okay, put your guardrails, put your rules, no problem with that, but selling it as enablers. It means that we can, okay, we can host this marketing website. Just use this platform, or making sure that you run a security vulnerability or penetration test. Right? Put your in work as an enabler, work as a helper to make things happen. Right? Detection capability I mentioned already, but it's something that we have to improve it a lot to capture traffic, especially from the shadow IT. Are you ready to say today that nobody else in your organization, the organization that you work in, that the organization that will be responsible to protect, are not running any workload outside of your AWS organization? Are you pretty sure that nobody is calling AWS API access directly through other accounts? You can capture that. Enable your logs, enable your web logs to start looking for who is accessing some public cloud API endpoints. And if you can see some URLs also, or even in the package, you start seeing the account IDs they are using, or some session information showing, okay, it's a part of their organization or not. and you are able to detect that. As soon as you detect, you can also approach the involved team and try to onboard it. Moving to the previous bullet, we can onboard the team to say, okay, let's put in our organization. I can show you the costs, and you can handle the controls in a central way. It doesn't matter how many providers that you have, more will come. It's another thing. In one of my previous experience, they are running with the 3 cloud providers, and they are looking and they're saying, okay, the 3 big ones are here, and the 4th one comes and disrupt a lot the routines that we had before. It means that we create good routines, good process, but the new cloud one, we are not ready for that yet. Normally, it happens when we shift from a cloud provider to a multi-cloud provider, right? Like you're managing a shop, now we are managing two shops, 2 stores at the same time. They are in the different streets. They have different ways to access. They have different doors. They have different keys. And we are using the same example also during this presentation today. And last but not least, cloud as a service, software as a service, platform as a service, or any AAS that you like to, could become a shadow IT as well. And I want to emphasize here 2 important examples. SaaS providers, software as a service providers, will be even more part of our daily activities. It's because, okay, we're defending from clouds, but the SaaS also represents clouds, third-party clouds. They are responsible to manage that, but basic security rules come from IT security, right? And the second point that I want to emphasize is about something that starts small, but it's coming bigger and bigger. Is desktop as a service, right? With more and more people work from home, this structure to enable desktop as a service or VPN as a service, even that, it will be even bigger and bigger. This flexibility that they want to go, especially after these issues related to COVID-19, will become even more present in our daily activities. Cool. It's time. It's time to talk about, okay, Moses talked a lot about what could happen, shadow IT, risk, and let's put our hands in the dirt. Let's see how can we protect. And at the end of the presentation, I will also show some interesting references and a good toolbox that you can use for that. Don't have to develop everything by yourselves, but before we start, one of the good things that I want to emphasize is if you don't have coding skills or don't have the spreadsheet, it's a good time to start. Automation is something that saves a lot of time. And I don't think that somebody is not doing what they have to do, but they could do even more automating tasks. Could start with Python, could start with Bash script, could start with PowerShell. It's not necessary to say, hey, use this one because it's better one. No, I think the better ones is one that we know and could meet our needs. Let's move forward. Before we dig in each provider, let's talk about all providers at the same time. And here we have the most important topic. Somebody does not get the right or good attention, but it makes a lot of difference if you well manage. IAM, Identity and Access Management. Okay, let's looking back. Let me use here a little bit of my white hair. When I just started that we use this old username and passwords only, short passwords actually. It creates an interface, a way to say to the applications, Who is the user? Fine. Okay, it means that IAM was an enabler. It provides, it create this way. And connected to my who am I, connect also which kind of access that I have. Okay, you have access to this and this and that with your username and password. And how about the accountability? How about the what you know, what you have, and what you have to do so after that? IAM is just like it. Everything that you put around, we're talking about adaptive authentication, multi-factor authentication, third-party authorization, SAML2, OpenID, or any other technology that we mentioned here is something that complements the basic things. If you are in the enterprise, doesn't matter how big it is. If you just arrive, the first thing that you have to take care is about IAM in the cloud environments, especially if you are looking for AWS environments. Look for the IAM users, permissions that they have, if they still active or not. It's quite common, for example, somebody leave the company, but the IAM account not. It's still in there. Password's not changed for, I don't know, 300 years? Sorry, oops, 300 days. And keys enable it forever and does not have access for a long time. Okay, I'm not using AWS. I'm a Microsoft guy. Okay, look for the service principals that you have, especially service principals not named as users. If it's connected if it's used to connect applications to applications, or also known as a service account or service keys that enable the communication between two of those, right? Look the least privilege, always important. Rotate the passwords or rotate the keys to making sure. Google Cloud, it's called GCP service accounts. All these three comes by default with static keys or passwords. They are all self-generated, or for AWS one specifically, we can also generate the password, Azure ones as well. But the keys that you generate for that are basically from a static source. It means if you don't change, it will not be changed for you. A good strategy always is looking for a way to federate your access. SAML2 is a well-known protocol and a framework for that you can leverage your directory, your Active Directory, or LDAP, or any other direct that you use as a service, for example, to connect these providers. If somebody leaves the organization, you just turn off one identity and it turns off all access to this one. Okay, tips and tricks about any provider. It's applicable for any provider, even the SaaS provider for the initial one. Like I said, here we're talking about not only tips and tricks, but also lessons learned. Before you start, the provider agreement should be submitted to legal and privacy before arriving in your hands. It means for you start using a provider, it's important that your legal department and your privacy team is aware what they are doing here. Okay, I know that especially the big three providers, it's hard to change terms in that, because basically you provide you a blank statement. If you didn't accept, they are not ready to do for. We know some exceptions, but we are talking about millions and $1 million contracts with dedicated team involved that to be able, okay, let's adjust this and this and that. But if you are signing, especially for the SaaS providers, look for the contract, and also any lock-in that you find, and also regulations applicable. If you're providing services for European region, how about GDPR? If you are providing services for China, for example, how we are compliant, how you are ready to handle some specific governance requirements. It's an important thing. It's before IT, and it's also ready to save a lot of time remediating things that could be changed from the privacy before the contract itself arrives. Okay, the second one is not something nice, but very important. Documentation. Keep your documentation, diagrams, and inventories up to date. Most important one, when you start looking, for example, in this NIST framework about cloud, the first area is identify. Means if you are not able to identify, you'll not be able to protect, you're not able to detect, you're not able to respond, and also you're not able to recover. Because if you didn't identify, it not exist, right? It's something interesting, because looking back some examples that I had in my career, I can see some people say, hey, this system is not working anymore. Okay, which system? Oh, the system X, Y, and Z. But where is it? I don't know. Which server is using? Which instance is using? Which provider is using this one? And normally the answer is no for all, or none of this applicable. And here it's an important one, documentation. Ingest this documentation. I know that especially diagrams and inventories for cloud is something hard to keep and maintain up to date. But in my toolbox, I have some tips for you. Federated credentials for users. Here we are talking about something like I just mentioned the previous slide. When you see, okay, instead of creating manually users in each provider, we are not federate them from my directory. What it means in a real example. I have an Active Directory, a Microsoft Active Directory, and I can use, for example, Microsoft Active Directory Federation Service. It means that I can connect AWS to my Microsoft service. And when I add a user to a specific group in my Active Directory, this user will be able to log in AWS using my Active Directory credentials and assume and have some permissions only available for that specific group. It's basically what happened in the middle is the group is connected to an AWS role, showing AWS as example, that these users will assume a role using Active Directory credentials. As soon as the user is not part of this specific Active Directory group that represent here our authorization step, the user will not be able to use it anymore. It's useful for users, not necessarily for applications, but I will mention applications shortly. Every time that we avoid one static user, it could be IAM, service principal, or service account, you are reducing the risk of your environment. Okay, we know sometimes it's necessary, but why not dynamic credentials instead of manual credentials? What it means? It means that, for example, if you have to use one resource in AWS, as an example again, you can provide the credentials dynamically. Basically, your instance could assume these permissions. The same thing could also happen with Azure. Your application has some access, and this access that your application has does not basically generate tokens dynamically. These tokens is valid for a short time. The standard configurations for loans will start with 1 hour, but no one offer more than 12 or 24 hours. It means if the credential leaks for any reason, you do not be used anymore. This token will rotate and it's not able to authenticate with this one anymore. Even using an on-prem environment, dynamic credentials is also useful. And there are some good options like HashiCorp Vault that you can generate dynamic credentials to access databases, to access clusters, even on-prem and in the cloud, starting with no cost. It's another thing that I can see that reduces the risk a lot. And moving forward, leverage your tools as soon as possible. It means if you have a monitoring tool, why not using the same tool in there? If you have a log solution, why not leverage there? If you have less tools, you have to spend less time looking for different consoles to look this one and see how and see any issue potential from there. Let's continue. Limit the internet-facing resources. If you are not putting your directory or your database, your internal database, production database directly on the internet, why doing that in the cloud? Protect that. Just if it's only internal facing, keep it in there, not exposing the internet. Okay, if you have to expose a web application, no problem. But why it's exposed directly on the instance? Why not expose it to a load balancer? That we can also apply some, for example, web application firewall rules to analyze the traffic, or even a NAT gateway that you can, okay, just HTTPS well format could come from there. Good IP allocation. Here we're talking about, okay, as soon as you define which IP blocks that to allocate for each provider, you'll be able to know when something happens, when it comes from. Normally, if you don't take too much attention, you start creating net points in your network, but it deflects, it creates some blind spots when the traffic could come from, and which source could represent some potential issues, right? We are finishing these big ones here, but it's important. Tagging policy. You should identify, first one again from the NIST framework, you should identify when who owns the resource, who responds if something happens. Okay, I can see a new instance here, but who owns this one? If it's not compliance, if it's internet exposed, I have to take some actions. Leverage infrastructure code. One good example for that is using Terraform, but there is other alternatives as well, because infrastructure code come with two things that save a lot of time. One thing is basically standard what would be provisioned in prod. The resource will arrive with naming conventions, will arrive in the right place, because it's not it's not a person manually creating the web interface. It's something that comes from a code. But the second one, it's a key one. It enables us in the security to run a code review. Code review means if somebody is trying to expose console ports like 22 for SSH, 3309 for RDP, or enabling this access that should not be enabled, we can capture that before they are provisioning prod. Encryption everywhere. Again, not only our big providers, but any SaaS provider can enforce that if it's possible. We are talking about not only in transit, using good TLS. Also, just saw one message today that Azure is deprecating TLS 1.1 and 1.0, and also the triple DES algorithm. It's something old, and there are a lot of non-security issues related to that. And use at least 1.2. I know that some providers does not offer 1.3 yet, but 1.2 for sure for encryption in transit, and at rest, good key management. Final, last but not least, about any provider. All providers spend a lot of money trying to help the customers to maintain some, or I'm not saying just spend, but also charge the customers to protect the workloads. But the same providers also offer a lot of tools for free. if we're saying, for example, recommendations from Microsoft Azure or the advisor from AWS, recommendations from Google Cloud, this is a useful thing for free. It's not have for, at least for basics, it's not a thing that have to pay for. Okay, have to pay for more, but it's something that we can start. AWS, our bigger in the market. What we can protect our organization and our enterprise in AWS. There is a component in AWS, it's called service control policies. Basically, when we have your account in AWS or multiple accounts in your AWS, you can control using one upper layer, it's called organizations. This feature means that you can link different accounts. Normally, it starts by the cost perspective because it centralizes the whole billing in one account. But it also helps you to apply some policies that in the top-down perspective could avoid some common mistakes. It also helps you to organize it in organization units, pretty similar to any LDAP directory like, and also the Active Directory. And we are mentioned briefly about the control tower, something that was launched not too many time ago that also automate this one. Okay, this is specifically for AWS, but it's also the same from the other's perspective. It means if you apply one specific service control policy, it also if it reflected when the account is from. It means if you have, for example, this example here, it's the organization screen. If you apply policy in this level, it affects the accounts hosting there. If you apply to the upper level, it will apply for all. It means if you have a more strict and that only allow some small actions, the smaller permission will be valid first, right? And here you can see some examples in the right that, for example, blacklist Redshift as a service. If you're not using Redshift or you're not allowing Redshift, why it's available for the user to spin up, right? And here's one example about enforced tagging. If you create this policy here, and here also I put a reference for that, it means if somebody tried to create a secret manager, it means create a place that you store a password. If it not comes with this tag, it's called project, it means that to not be allowed. It's something to help to enforce tagging. It means that you can put this tag in the, it means you can put this policy, and if somebody tried to create a default tag, they are not allowed to do that. The same, another important ones, if you're an AWS user with organization, if you use this one, probably will be happy with you. Prevent that your account does not leave the organization. Because if you have a user with a root access from one specific account, one child account, they could ask to leave the organization. If you didn't prevent that, the account could leave, and it could be also a production account, and it could be terminated, all data deleted. If you just deploy this one, for sure, it will save a lot of nights and a lot of time. Also important one is denying child accounts to stop CloudTrail or to delete or even to update the CloudTrail. Because when they do that, it will stop the logging. AWS Control Tower, briefly, it's a service to help to automatize this part. It's a new service. It's not here for a long time, but it's something that you can look afterwards, especially the account factory, because helps to provision the accounts with some good guardrails in there. Here, the final one about the AWS. The AWS Security Hub is also useful because you can capture some issues before they arrive or before they take any big impact. Azure, Microsoft Azure, this is the overall structure when you have Azure. Means that you have Azure AD in the top, and you as a Azure AD, you have a tenant ID. And you have subscriptions, and the subscriptions have resource groups, and the resource group have resources. It means when you go to this way, you can apply policies in the resource group level or subscription level, resource groups level, or directly to the resources itself. As soon as we also able to apply the same thing, the same concept from AWS when we apply, for example, in the management group level, it will be cascaded to the all objects in there. It helps to save a lot. This is the overall information about how it works. And here, basically, it encapsulates these policies that you prevent the users to do something. And the good thing about Azure at this time, and thanks for Active Directory Journey for that, you can also remediate some issues out of the box. Here is an example about some organization policies that could be done. But if you want to edit also by CLI, it's enabled by this way. You can see here it's using, like AWS, a JSON format. And also JSON it's a good friend. Trust me, it's a good friend. And you can see here, okay, I'm not allowing that somebody uses a region that's not part of my list. It means if I'm operate a business in Japan, why am I allowing to somebody spin up a resource in London? It's not aligned. Privacy is okay with that. Legal is okay with that. Yeah, it's a good thing. You are not a blocker. You are enabled. If you start seeing, we can say, hey, get the legal and privacy agreement, and you can move forward. Here is another, it's also a view about the Azure Security Center. Very nice tool. We can also include some AWS workloads, and we can monitor everything. That is a free version, and also I extended, that's also paid, that you can capture those security monitoring. I can see it's also more mature to the AWS at this time, but I know that my AWS is improving a lot. Google Cloud. Google Cloud is, okay, the structure is quite similar. Basically, you have also organization. Organization come to folders, folders come to subfolders. And what means AWS account in AWS, subscription in Azure, in Google Cloud is called projects. Basically, we can have multiple projects in one folder, one or more folders in another folder, and all connect to the organization. You can apply policies in each of these levels. And again, the policies will be inherited to the overall resources connected to that. Here is a quick view about some policies applied in the organization level. And here about Google Cloud, something important to mention is, okay, a lot of policies come out of the box, but take care of especially about IAM permissions. Because I know that the difference between the standard read, edit, and full access, it's not quite granular by default or out of the box. Take care about this one. But it's also pretty good. Here is one policy example. It can also help you to enforce the interfaces, easy to adjust and also easy to, okay, for enforcing or not, is for one specific region or for all, you can do that. Finally, for Google Cloud, we start seeing here, because as AWS has the Security Hub, Azure is Azure Security Center, Google Cloud has this Google Security Command Center, right? Final thoughts. Wow, we are talking a lot of information, and also thank you because you read it up to this point. One term that I like is from Demetriou Leah is about prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. Logs. Collect all logs that you can. Doesn't matter if you're using the best of class SIEM or even a small or open source syslog server, but capture your logs. But basically it represents your eyes. From there that you get your insights from any provider, even the SaaS providers. Because some part of these logs from the SaaS providers show some issues starting that's not affecting other environments as well. How much data that we basically has hosted in the SaaS providers today? Why not collect data from there? Why not collect logs, sorry. And if data is one of the most important assets for organization, for where is it, also log should come from. Log ingestion is a good enabler for self-remediation. What it means? It means that as soon as we'll be, okay, for any reason, I can't block a user to stop the CloudTrail. But as soon as we detect that, we can trigger another action to re-enable it or create a new one or alert somebody. As soon as we get some maturity level, especially when prevention is not allowed or not possible for any reason, you can use your detection to enable self-remediation. If somebody creates a bucket with a S3 bucket or a blob storage or anything like that without encryption, just enforce encryption. Why not? It's an important one. And let's talk about our toolbox. Here's some good softwares that you can use. All has at least a version that you can use for free. Some also offer some extra features that you have to pay for. Prowler is a good one that you evaluate those 3 providers that I mentioned today against some standards. I'm using for a long time. Cloud Custodian, it's a project maintained by Captain One. Also very nice to enforce policies. It's one of the first self-remediation tools that you can use. CheckOV is a good to capture something that comes from the infrastructure as code, that you can capture this one by automation, free version available. Cloud Exploit to start seeing where is the issue. Okay, I just analyzed the environment. Our Sentry is it's an interesting one. I didn't realize for a long time, but it's also to help to keep updated cloud diagrams by automation for those 3 providers. Okay, I have workloads for containers. Let's use Falco. It's a well recognized as one of the best open source protection for containers. And also it's called Suite. Again, as a part of the final thoughts, reference. CIS benchmarks that come from CI Security is one of the also well-recognized one that shows a lot of thoughts that prevent those risks. Cloud Security Alliance, it's another important one. And someone that is well known from the security fields is OWASP, NIST, and ENISA that represent the EU government about these rules as well. Each provider also comes from these well-architected frameworks or well-architected guides. It's always a good reference because they provide some specific security tools that you can use for that. Even just protect from, even if it's just telling about protection, we know that these issues will come, but be ready for using these tools, using this reference, that I'm pretty sure that you get a good result. And now, sorry to not take too much time for that, but let's talk and run some Q&As if I have available.
All right, thank you so much, Moses. Yes, I have a few questions here, so I'll jump in and get started. This first one came in just a few minutes before, or a few minutes after we started. They said, is risk not a part of cybersecurity?
risk, it's a part of the cybersecurity or interface with cybersecurity a lot of times. I can see today is more like a gray area because risk it's normally evaluated or handled by information security professionals, not necessarily by cybersecurity professionals. But the controls that they applied or the situations or any threats they evaluated come from cybersecurity fields. That's also pretty important to talk about both.
All right, thanks. This next one says, great presentation. In global organizations with substantial existing shadow IT, who should own the identification or gathering the inventory of shadow IT providers in the place at the organization?
In my perspective, who owns this this role to identify those workloads should be the same team or the same organization or department that is responsible for IT security or corporate IT security. It's not easy to sometimes to ask budget for that, and also some tools are pretty expensive. But I can see that it's a role for IT security at least to start detecting or look for a policy that enforces all the departments to be ready to detect. When I find something, talk with IT security to move things forward.
All right, thanks. With respect to the importance of logs, what are your views around using SaaS solutions that operate on serverless cloud infrastructure?
Yeah, it's a great question. SaaS, when they're using SaaS solutions, normally they provide some in provider or out of the box solutions to export those logs. Basically, we have two situations. One, some providers offers, okay, you can ask me that I can send those logs, use some security protocol to an external SIEM. It's one thing. It's not well known. Maybe sometimes it's not something easy to find, but they offer in the advanced configurations. The second one, okay, it's a little bit more tasks to us. They offer APIs that we, as a part of the security, can consume. It means that we can query the SaaS provider API, collect logs from a small period, and then pull again, basically pulling those logs to our systems. I'm pretty sure that all good providers comes with at least one of these two options.
All right, well, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much, Moses, for your great presentation, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.
Thank you very much, guys. See you. Bye-bye.